Spoilers. Duh. Pokemon's newest entry into the Legends branch of games is out, and I cannot believe how alright it is. The gameplay is mostly fun, the story is acceptable, and the characters are entertaining. And I'm capable of losing for reasons besides falling asleep, so it's pretty great. Or, well, it's good. Which in this day and age is a blessing. As AAA games budgets increase inversely to their quality and the consumer becomes more critical of the product, having a game that is a solid 7 out of 10 is a rare treat. But much to my shock, while there are those rightly celebrating the game's upsides, there are plenty dismissing it entirely for the handful of bad spots, or more disingenuously, due to personal grievances with the company that's distributing it. Which prompts the following question and observation. Why is it that gamers today are so quick to write off any game that is not a 10 out of 10? It's not just ZA I've seen this with. I even saw some hating on Silksong for quote-unquote confusing motion controls or steep difficulty, which oftentimes those same people were the ones refusing to engage with the game at its own level. In other words, the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. But as Legends ZA is the most recent example of this I could find, and I genuinely enjoyed the game, I thought I could use this as my focus for addressing the growing perfectionism at work here. So this will be both a review and a critique on how skewed perceptions can lead us to judging a product without merit. And to get the easiest part out of the way, let's talk about the best part of Legends Zaza, the Historically, Pokémon has valued individually compelling characters over a fleshed-out ensemble, which makes sense when most games see you traveling from place to place without a central location to route you. Recent games have changed this, most prominently in Scarlet and Violet, which by far has the best story, and the cast plays a big part in that. However, much like classic Pokémon games, the split stories in Scarlet and Violet emphasize one character at a time, with the closest it ever comes to focusing on a group dynamic being the DLC after-story and the Team Star post-story events. Legends ZA, on the other hand, maintains an ever-active cast that is acting in the story with regularity. At any given moment, you could encounter just about anyone while out and about on your adventure. This serves to make Lumio City, a setting that should feel small in comparison to past regions' sprawling games, feel more alive, to say nothing of the central squad, Team MZ. While on an individual basis I find the friend group from Scarlet and Violet to be more interesting, they are left with few chances to play off each other, or just exist in the world. Usually they're off to one objective after the next. Team MZ, on the other hand, is clearly made with the group dynamic in mind. Their interactions are charming and make me want to root for them. Not because of some deep backstory, but because I just had fun watching them. You can also see them grow alongside you, tackling many of the same challenges and doing their part to help save Lumiose as a whole, making them feel more involved and therefore livelier. The same is true for the Royale Challengers, at least from rank F onward. Don't worry, I'll get to that. They serve the function of gym leaders, type specialists that block your progress, but you spend more time with them than most gym leaders by leaps and bounds. Half the time, just the process to getting to fight them serves as the narrative reason to get to know them better, and so it makes battling them feel more impactful. It's also used to be one of the funniest written Pokémon games that I can recall. Violet had its moments that made me smile, but I can't remember the last time Pokémon characters made me actually laugh as much as ZA's ensemble cast did. Compare this to the likes of Sword and Shield or Scarlet and Violet's gym leaders who, almost to the man, exist inside their gyms and nowhere else until the post-game, where their purpose becomes just as sparring partners with no bearing on the plot or deep interaction with the world or player. Piers got to do some stuff, I guess, but my goat Corbeau is out here being the Pokemon world's short king Giorno Giovanna, and Ivor is Team Plasma if they had an actual solution. It's a nonsense solution, but that's more than Team Plasma ever pretended to have. And Jacinth? Do I really need to explain Jacinth? All my initial disgust at the snooty elitist vanished to the tune of Electro Swing as she's just so fun to watch. Canary is kinda just Iono again, but they act distinct enough that I'm willing to let that slide, since frankly Iono wishes she had as much screen time as Canary. And then we have the two big returning characters, AZ and Lysander, who carry the themes of renewal, redemption, and putting the past to rest. The entire plot is built on the story of who they are to Kalos and the impact their past sins have had. Admittedly, AZ spends most of his time hanging in the background and only involving himself directly a couple of times, but Lysander, now going by L, involves himself in the same role AZ served in X and Y, except more successfully. Whereas AZ in X and Y was just a random homeless man as far as we were concerned, Lysander's history inherently makes him more mysterious, asking the question as to whether he's really changed. And to see how far he's come not only gives hope to who he can be, but reaffirms that AZ can also atone for his own mistakes. Overall, the cast and even random side characters of ZA far exceeded my expectations, even if a few of the folks in Lumiose are, certifiably deranged. But hey, most of them are fine. Which is itself a good analogy for ZA. It's got some problems, genuine ones that you'd be right in pointing out, but that does not take away from the successes. But when glancing at criticisms laid at the game's feet, the characters don't seem to be one of them. Sure, there are some odd complaints about the primary team being too static in the story, but seeing as they mostly serve the role of being your friends as you commit to the main story, I can forgive it. S&V kind of spoiled us with each of the main cast getting their own personalized stories, as compared to ZA, where the main plot is linear and not as free to give time solely to one character for a whole plotline. They could have improved that, sure, but I don't think it takes too much away from it. I think it works fine in this case, but I can understand someone wanting something different. But characters are nothing without a place to inhabit. So let's talk about the game's Lumiose City is a bit of a mixed bag for me, personally. On one hand, nice to be back in what was one of the landmarks of Kalos back in X and Y, and where they could have been stuck with just the city's streets and wild zones for exploration and Pokémon catching, they made the right call developing upwards to add layers to Lumiose's design, and hiding surprises in spots only accessible through exploration, like items and Pokémon that couldn't be found elsewhere. It makes putting in the time to do so feel rewarding, and so encourages the player to do more of it. But on the other hand, there is a lot of cityscape, and yes, I know, it's set in a city, but that doesn't make it any less true. Heck, most wild zones aren't even any different from how they were beforehand. Sure, some get environmental changes, but some of these are just more city streets. And as a full-throated lover of the countryside, I am in need of some variety here. The handful of unique environments there are to see are a dark and dank sewer and a busted-up laboratory. Not quite the diverse locales, huh? The intelligent exploration can only go so far when so much of the city looks the same, with very few big and memorable landmarks. We have Prism Tower, sure, and Hotel Z shoved into a corner somewhere, but the only other buildings that really stand out to me are the Rust Syndicate HQ and the Quizartico building. It results in a lot of environments blending together as you go from place to place. This is also as good a time as any to talk about the graphics, and before you ask, yes, I am playing this on a Switch 1. I have heard a storm of criticisms thrown towards ZA for how it looks. Gripes about Windows lacking texture or whatever. While I know Scarlet and Violet's graphical issues have traumatized a generation, and rightly so, I find it so strange the expectations y'all seem to have. What Tiger Mom standards must you have to be mad that you can't see every contour of a window pane or every pore of a person's face? I thought it was well established that people were tired of games that emphasized appearance over substance. Look, I won't argue it's more detailed than it is. It's serviceable. But it still retains some truly breathtaking moments anyway. And frankly, I'd take a game that looks just slightly dated with actual depth over an 800K Ultra HD pile of garbage any day. Of course, and though I'll waste little time on it since it's so universally praised, the music lends itself to adding to the experience. Battle themes, sure. Jacinth and Elle's themes alone have occupied my brain ever since I heard them, and now I'm pretty sure I hear them in my sleep. But even the ambient track that plays while exploring the city helps get me in the relaxed mindset I feel ZA is trying to get you into, so that you can appreciate the depth that is present. As for that depth, it's primarily found in the ZA takes a rather sharp turn from Pokémon's traditional style, and how you feel about it will definitely impact how you feel about the game. If you hate it, fair enough, I can't be too upset there. However, I think it's an important detour to make. Pokémon as a franchise has, at several points in its history, gotten too complacent and too comfortable, which can cause the games they make to lack as much depth in gameplay as prior generations. Just slap a new gimmick on and call it a day. But ZA totally flipped the script by not just making battles real-time, but they also removed PP, abilities, and reintroduced Mega Evolution, the original major Pokemon gimmick that started the trend. They also introduced new mechanics like plus moves and completely changed how certain moves worked, some for better and some for worse. It's not a flawless transition. The format has actively hindered some parts of the game. Because you have to be targeting a Pokemon to make a command, if your opponent uses Fly, Bounce, or Dig, then you are a sitting duck to whatever it chooses to do. I was nearly wiped out by Terragon because of his Mega Excadrill spamming Swords Dance and Dig, and any answer I had to it was too slow to counter. Some Pokemon also just got major nerfs that annihilated their viability, like Electros or Sableye losing their abilities. Meanwhile, Aegislash, a Pokemon I basically had to beat my head against a wall to make worthwhile, is almost unusable because of the real-time mechanics and how slow Aegislash's stance changes are. Battles are quick, snappy things that do feel satisfying to get through when you have a solid team, but Lord have mercy on you if a Pokemon you like is slow. No matter how bulky it is, if it isn't fast enough to outrun the haters, then it's not worth even putting on your team. I did anyway, though, because I love Aegislash and am so stubborn that I'd probably take perpetually getting kneecapped by every opponent I meet than getting rid of it. Other issues I have are more quality of life problems, like how clunky catching a Pokemon in battle can be, or the grind fest that is the Mabel task rewards. I just cannot comprehend why they didn't make these tasks more like the ones in Arceus. I feel like they would have worked even better in this context. They also changed the button inputs for throwing Pokeballs during battle, which is the cause for the aforementioned issues. But let's turn to positives, shall we? To start, the roster of available Pokemon is great. And that's not just because 5 of my top 6 favorite Pokemon are in the game, so I can make a nearly perfect team of them. However, as Nintendo surely hates a power couple, my favorite Pokemon of Nidoking and Nidoqueen are denied existence in the most recent generation. In the realm of being unfair, Mega Evolution. Once it was a bit of a shaky concept because, at least in X and Y, there were so few you could reasonably have access to, and the Pokemon that could be Mega Evolved tended to become the centerpiece of your entire team. And so it made it more and more likely that your teams would resemble each other playthrough by playthrough. It's like handing me several nice pistols on one table and then laying down a minigun on another and expecting me to show restraint. Mega Evolution is more reasonable, as it lets you have a full team of 6 miniguns that you can use at nearly any time. This analogy is escaping from me, I think, but no longer bound to 1 per battle. You could stunt on the bosses by Mega Evolving almost every other minute if you really wanted to. Why would I resort to such overkill? Because I run these streets and the peasants need to learn their place. I think my Energisynth is taking over. Better get that checked out. On the topic of assaulting the locals, the central event that frames ZA's story is the ZA Royale, and as far as excuses for lots of battles go, it's a pretty good one. Side objectives to boost your points, and giving further use to sneaking and ambush tactics you'd acquire in Pokemon catching ensure the Royale doesn't get really tedious. At least not until the post-game, but you've got to while away your time somehow. We all know you aren't going outside anytime soon. The Royale itself is more set dressing for progressing the game and getting you to the major boss battles, and especially the rogue Pokemon battles, which show off how good Mega Evolved Pokemon can be when they're allowed to reject limitations such as the rules, and instead juice up on the souls of the damned, as is the French way. If you were ever feeling dissatisfied with the number of kaiju-sized monsters in Legends Arceus trying to convert your bones into powder that they might snort it, worry not, as ZA has drastically increased their numbers. Believe it or not, this is a good thing. Rogue Mega Evolved Pokemon come in batches of 3 and provide unique battles in ZA you're unlikely to find even in comparison to Legends Arceus. What the nobles started, the rogues will finish. A couple small tips I should have learned sooner. Status effects do not work. Rogues do not have to obey any of the rules of battling, much less type advantages. And the most effective form of dodging is drawing your Pokemon back into the ball and Usain Bolting away from danger while you can. You'll probably learn this stuff by playing the game and applying some creative thinking, but you never know. All of this proves to make the gameplay experience of Legends ZA quite enjoyable in spite of its weaknesses. Mix that with what I said about exploration, and I managed to find fun by just running around the city, catching Pokemon, and battling once night fell. Which was extra pleasant since the music of Pokemon, as always and without fail, soothes the part of my brain that reminds me of the good old days, when champions wouldn't get soloed by a potato and women wouldn't suddenly appear behind me on a whim. Although, now that I think about it, that may have happened more than I thought. Of course, there is one more part of the game to talk about, and that is the After everything I said, some of you may still expect me to follow the internet pipeline of 100% committing to one opinion and saying that ZA's story is good. End of statement. That is not the case. There are more than a few faults that pull me out of it whenever I play. For instance, the tutorial is painfully modern in that it takes 2 whole business days just to complete it. You aren't allowed to freely explore until you get your first few side missions from Emma, the irrelevant Naruto-running detective. The entire time up to that point, you are corralled by Tawny/Urbane, who, like a needy partner, is calling you every time you step out of sight. There are also a few plot threads and hanging questions that never get decent resolution. Naveen's conflict with his grandmother, why did the player come to Lumiose? Where are the ever-loving Arceus' Clement and Bonnie? Why does no one try to arrest the omnicidal terrorist? Where in the world is Jacinth? That last one's a trick question, she's right behind you. Unresolved issues like this leave the story feeling messier, which absolutely didn't have to be the case, and wraps into another criticism I have, and that's the flippant way the story treats the Royale pre-rank 5. The story has you, at one point, jump several ranks shortly after your first Rogue Mega fight, which I think is a missed opportunity, as the process of ranking up, while it could have been tedious, would have also given the story breathing room to flesh out its less developed parts. Imagine if, instead of jumping to F, we use that time to better know Team MZ, and even introduce us to or hint at important characters that show up later. We get a bit of that with Ivor, but he's really the only example. Hint at Tawny/Urbane meeting the Rust Syndicate, Naveen watching Canary, or Lita's love for dance, as well as her somewhat admiration for Jacinth's whole group. You might have to make that aspect more prevalent for this to work, but either way. Give us time to soak in the people and feel of Lumiose. You could even pit us against Naveen and Lita as promotion battle, which would make for better justification to fight them early on than just because. You'd have to slow down some of the gameplay developments and level caps, but I think it'd be worth it. Unlike with the tutorial, you'd still have the freedom to go around the city as you please after all. That all said, some of this is still pretty great, you have to admit. I've already talked about how I love the characters, but the building intrigue and payoff surrounding the ZA Royale and Prism Tower was handled rather well. It got a bit shaky at times, clearly trying to paint Quasartico as potentially evil as a red herring and sidetracking us with the Team Flare lore that doesn't really loop back into the main plot too much. But at least with the Team Flare storyline, it managed to improve where X and Y failed, which is pretty much the biggest upside to ZA in my opinion. So many of Kalos' original flaws are ironed out by this sequel, in the kind of story you just can't tell in a mainline Pokémon game. Once ZA gets on a roll though, it knows how to use that momentum, and how to use its focal characters to drive the narrative and build to that tremendous final act. Legitimately, ZA has the most cinematic ending to any Pokémon game I've played in a while, and as a guy who grew up on Shadows of Almia and Explorers of Sky, believe me, I need more gravitas in my Pokémon games. I know they can pull it off. Every character gets their moment to shine, and we get to perform some gardening with Zygarde in the final boss fight with Ange Floette, which amped up the spectacle to the stratosphere with how they implemented Zygarde. And the gameplay integration into the reveal of Mega Zygarde was the cherry on top, which left me quite happy with how ZA wrapped itself up. The post-game is admittedly not as dense as Arceus's, and I wish you'd have gotten some agency when it came to the wish promised to you. I'd have also supported giving Xerneas and Yveltal proper boss fights similar to the one we get for Zygarde soon after. But for what we have now, and comparing it to the good and bad that it could have been, I'm happy with the final product. Is it perfect? No, not even slightly. But nothing made by human hands can hope to be. And before any of you even try it, that doesn't mean AI either. AI is also made by human hands. Tangent aside, Pokémon Legends ZA is a fine continuation of the Legends line of Pokémon games, and I hope more and more people come to recognize that rather than just wailing insults at it for not being good enough, or more erroneously, not being Game of the Year material. When did we, as a society, come to the conclusion that every game has to be the best game ever made, or it's hot garbage? Why are just good games suddenly a sin? There are numbers to be found in between 1 and 10. It used to be that you could appreciate a game for what it was, appreciate any form of media for what it was while accepting its flaws. ZA is mired by problems, but that should not overshadow the abundance of good to be found instead. So no, I don't think I'll write off Pokémon as dead just yet. Nintendo may be doing its best Scrooge impression and the industry as a whole is dying over a lack of overall quality, but I had fun in Lumiose. And that's the whole point of a video game. Thank you so much for watching my rant up to this point, and if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, blah blah blah, you know the drill. A huge shout out to all my patrons and channel members, generously bankrolling my slow but certain descent into YouTube madness. Both groups get access to videos earlier than the YouTube release and access to a private Discord server where they can interact with me directly. Just $3 a month, but it's by no means necessary. Just being here and watching is more than enough. Now with that all said and done, I will see you all next time around the hearth.